Welcome or welcome back to Self Made. I'm your host, Jason Shipway, also known as Jason Cleans if you follow me on the socials. And in this podcast, we share practical tips for small business owners in the cleaning industry. And in this episode, we'll explore why balancing anecdotal evidence with analytical data leads to smarter business decisions. And as a cleaning business owner, you likely rely on personal gut feelings like customer conversations, team feedback, and those anecdotal insights that tell the story behind your business. At the same time, though, you have hard data from metrics, surveys, and KPIs that kind of quantify how your business is doing. So how do we combine both worlds, the stories and the statistics, to make the best decisions? And in today's episode, we're going to cover what's anecdotal versus analytical. Like, what does it really mean? What is the anecdotal versus the analytical evidence in a cleaning business context? Because that's what we're here for. And why you need both. You need both the gut feelings and the numbers to avoid mistakes and spot opportunities. We're also going to cover real examples from cleaning businesses, like interpreting client feedback or tracking job times and anything else that comes with that, and showing the anecdotal insight in action alongside data. There's going to be 6 practical tips for balancing customer stories with KPI dashboards and other metrics, so you can use those in your day-to-day decisions, and a friendly, casual but professional discussion on avoiding the pitfalls of relying on only one side, the intuition or the data. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear understanding of not only what it is, but how you can use both your head and your gut to help your cleaning business thrive. So let's dive in. Also, if I sound any different, I think the audio is actually a little bit better. I installed some new driver software on my computer, and I got a new audio interface. So let me know if the audio sounds a bit better than previous episodes. Hopefully it does. And I have lost my voice a little bit. I was doing a lot of yelling and screaming over the weekend. Don't ask me why. I was having a bit too much fun. But unfortunately, I've lost my voice a little bit. But let's see if we can get through this episode without a hiccup. If you spot any or hear any weird pauses or jump cuts throughout this, it's probably because I was coughing up a lung or having an absolute fit. But anyway, let's dive in, okay? So anecdotal versus analytical evidence. What's the difference? Okay, anecdotal evidence refers to the stories, the observations, and the first-hand insights that you gather in the field. This can include, things like a conversation with a long-time client about the service. It can be informal feedback from your cleaning staff after a job, or it could even just be like a general vibe of the market or the industry, and that you sense about a new trend. For example, noticing more clients are asking about eco-friendly cleaning. These insights are qualitative. They're about experiences and observations rather than numbers. Anecdotes put a human face on your business data. Whereas analytical evidence, that means the hard data and facts, the numbers that come from your business operations. This includes metrics like how long a standard cleaning job takes, your customer satisfaction ratings, the number of client complaints and compliments, and monthly revenue figures, and customers gained and lost, and results from surveys, and key performance indicators, the KPIs, the employee productivity or client retention rate. This data is quantitative. It's measurable and it's objective. It often comes from reports, software, or spreadsheets that you use to manage your cleaning contracts and your clients. So we use a lot of spreadsheets in our business. I have a VA, actually 2 VAs that run our whole kind of KPI dashboard. They do a lot of spreadsheeting between the 2 of them. It's really, really valuable data for the business. But of course, we can't do that without the anecdotal evidence as well, which we're going to get into. And so why distinguish them? Understanding the difference sets the stage for using them together. So you think of anecdotal versus analytical as stories versus statistics. That's an easier way to put it. Anecdotes provide context and new ideas. Analytics provide verification and scope. For example, a cleaner on your team, they might mention like, the accountant's office today. It always takes us like an extra half an hour because of their strict security check-in process. That's anecdotal, but your time tracking data and your job management system that does track what goes on at this accountant's office, it might show that they're on average taking half an hour, 40 minutes longer. Now that's analytical, but separately, each piece only tells you part of the story. Together, though, they give you the full picture. In this case, it's highlighting an issue with the client in terms of security, which is leading to an increase in the job time, which will decrease the profit for that job. And that's exactly why anecdotal insights matter. They're human stories from the field, or in the office, or just from your customers. The anecdotal insights are incredibly valuable in a cleaning business because they capture the human element and context that the numbers might miss. And how important is that in a business where we are so people focused and we are so people centered? How important is that human element and the context? So a few ways anecdotal evidence proves its worth is from early warnings and new ideas. That's a big one. So, personal observations often serve as an early warning system. For instance, if you have a commercial cleaning business, your evening cleaning crew members might say like, lately, a lot of employees at this daycare center that we clean are working late. So it's hard to vacuum the floors on schedule, and we're like working over each other and we're losing time. This is a qualitative feedback. It is anecdotal feedback that might alert you to a change at the client's site before any metric like delayed completion time actually flags it. And so acting on this anecdote, maybe, like adjusting the cleaning schedule or coordinating with the client could prevent a service lapse before it shows up in the data, and it'll save you a lot of money and time. And also understanding the why behind the numbers, that's really important as well. So the anecdotes can explain the reasons behind your metrics. So like imagine your customer retention has gone down from, like 90% to 70%. The data tells you something changed, but not why. And then a quick phone call, if you want to get on the phone with a client or a bunch of clients or the office manager, then you can actually start to dig into the anecdotal reason for why that's happening. You call some clients up, maybe you call some past clients, and you start to hear feedback. You start to hear stories like, the bins weren't being emptied properly. The bin cupboard wasn't being cleaned. The vacuuming wasn't as good anymore. And so we start to develop this anecdotal feedback, and that gives us context to why the numbers are dropping. So the story there is actually key to fixing the issue. Without speaking to the clients or whoever it was in this case, which is the anecdotal insight, you'd be guessing at why those numbers had dropped. And it's also good for building relationships and intuition. So talking directly with customers and the employees, it builds your intuition about the business. So over time, you develop a feel for what clients value most. For example, a few homeowners, they might casually mention they love the personal thank you note that your cleaner leaves behind after each visit if you do stuff like that, or a little chocolate or a little gift that you leave after every visit. It's not a metric in any report, but this anecdotal feedback tells you those small personal touches matter. Now you can decide to make that a standard practice company-wide, and that's a change that's driven by stories, not statistics. So it's really good for building relationships and your personal intuition and gut feeling when it comes to your business. Okay. Now, another example of this would be with client feedback. Like, let's say you run a residential cleaning service, and one day, 2 different clients mention to you, I really wish you offered green cleaning products. Like, I'd even pay a bit more for eco-friendly supplies and that sort of stuff. Stuff that's friendly for my dog and my young baby that's crawling on the floor now. This is anecdotal evidence coming directly from customer conversations. It might only be 2 voices, but it could be a signal to a broader interest. And so how do you use that? Well, you wouldn't immediately overhaul your entire inventory based on 2 comments, but you also shouldn't ignore them, So instead, you treat them as sort of a hypothesis. Perhaps more clients want eco-friendly options, and you could collect some data, maybe send a quick email with a survey to all of your clients asking if they would be interested in a green cleaning option. And that's turning an anecdote into a measurable stat. So the anecdote was, maybe clients want green cleaning products. And so we turn that into a hypothesis. We set it up in the form of a survey, and now it is a measurable stat that we can quantify. Okay, I hope I'm not losing you here. And if the survey, the analytical evidence shows that, say 40% of customers are interested, then the anecdotal insight is validated and you have the numbers to justify a new green cleaning service. But if only 2% of the survey care, then you know those 2 comments were outliers and a full change might not be worth it. So the key point I want to mention here is that the anecdotal feedback sparked the idea and the data helped confirm it or size it. So you can use the anecdote to get an idea or get a bit of insight. And then you use the statistical or the analytical evidence to verify that and validify it. So we talked about how the anecdotal insights matter. Let's talk about the flip side, why the data and the analytics matter, in not only in isolation, but in accordance with the anecdotal insights as well. So the numbers tell you what's happening across the board. This is your more formal evidence. So relying on data also has several benefits. The objective decision making, the data that you collect and the analytics that you gather, they give you objective ground to stand on. So emotions or unique incidents, they can cloud judgment, but numbers often bring clarity. For example, you might feel like a certain cleaning employee is slower and maybe not as good as the other team members because you got one complaint about them running behind or missing something. But if you look at the data from your scheduling app and if you have gross profit spreadsheets, if you look at that, then you can see that employee is actually meeting the target time on like 95% of their jobs. So that one incident was an exception. And the data prevents you from unfairly reprimanding someone or getting emotional and calling someone out based on an isolated story. And so it also gives you the bigger picture, right? So while anecdotes tend to be specific and local, data can reveal the overall trend or the overall bigger picture. You might hear individual feedback here or there, but your metrics aggregate across all clients and jobs. They show the patterns that you can't see anecdotally. For example, you may not realize it from casual conversations, but your dashboard in your cleaning job management software or whatever you use, it might show that Tuesday is consistently the day with the most employee like overtime hours or the most employees going overtime on certain jobs. And that insight could lead you to investigate why Tuesdays are particularly heavier than other days. Like maybe Monday is a bit quieter. And then it's a pattern that you can only find through the analytics. And so no single anecdote would kind of highlight that. So we had that in our business where like we were just getting slammed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For some reason, we got the most amount of complaints on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and people just weren't happier on those days. And we looked into it and we noticed the pattern. Like people were just way too overworked on Tuesday and Thursday. I don't know why. I don't know why those 2 days in particular. Mondays were super quiet. Wednesdays were usually pretty quiet. And so we saw the numbers. We fixed that pattern and we nipped that in the bud pretty quickly. So we just started putting a lot of jobs into Monday and kind of balancing out the rest of the schedule. And we saw a lot of negative metrics started to dissipate after that. And so the third reason why the data and the analytics matter is that it's measuring what works, and as a byproduct of that, it measures what doesn't as well, which is equally as important. So the data lets you test ideas and measure results, right? Suppose you introduce a new floor cleaning technique, or like you start using a new mop or something like that, okay? And maybe you did that because one of your employees like swore it was going to save time. We had this with like some of our dusters. We had an employee suggest this particular type of duster, so we tried it because they absolutely swore it was going to save time. And but like, how do you know that's truly effective? The anecdote might be there that the cleaners might be saying that this new mop or this new feather duster or whatever it is saving time, but you have to track the actual numbers. Okay, so then when you look a little bit deeper into it and you start tracking the job completion times, and like if you do quality scoring, if you're checking the quality scores, and if you don't know what that is, you can just look at like the amount of reclaim requests or client ratings or client feedback, and you can quantify those into numbers. If you look at that and those improve, then maybe those new techniques or those new products were good, and you're using the analytics to back up that anecdotal insight or that idea. And so we're verifying it like that. The data-driven decision-making tends to produce better outcomes rather than just like a gut feeling or intuition. And most companies that rely primarily on data, they see slightly higher productivity and profits on average. So the empirical evidence gives you confidence that a decision is working as intended. The analytical evidence is what gives you the clarity. It's what gives you the validity and the verification behind these anecdotal situations and these ideas and these pieces of feedback. And so like another example would be tracking job times. Like, so if you can imagine, like you manage a team of 5 cleaners, and let's just say you use a software like Jobber to log when they start and finish each job. Over a few months, you gather this data and you notice that maybe post-construction cleanup jobs consistently take 20% longer than estimated or budgeted for. That's a pattern in the data. And by analyzing it, you discover that these jobs involve extra steps that you weren't aware of, because maybe like you've grown to the point where you're a bit removed from it, like I am now. So I've had this a few times where I look at the numbers after a while and I'm like, oh, we need to revisit this because I think that we've underquoted this, or this is being mismanaged. Okay. And then, and that's not being accounted for. So the analytical evidence might prompt you to adjust like pricing or staffing or time management on a job, or just the overall scope altogether. And now you combine that with the anecdotal evidence, right? So you combine the analytical with the anecdotal again. And your staff might have been telling you like, oh, these construction sites they're like really tough to clean. Like there's so much stuff that we just weren't prepared for, like grout haze and like these concrete specs on windows and things like that, that we were told that wasn't going to be the case in this particular site. And so the anecdotal comments would alert you to the issue, and the data quantifies how big the issue really is, like 20% or 30% longer cleaning times on average. So together, they guide you to a smart business adjustment. So it could be perhaps like just charging a premium for these particular types of jobs, or having a discussion with the client and adjusting the scope, and whatever it may be. But even as important as both sides of the token are, the anecdotal and the analytical, there is a danger of relying on only one side. So like, for example, focusing only on anecdotes or only on data can lead to skewed decisions. It leads to an imbalance in your decision-making process. So let's quickly talk about the pitfalls of each of these extremes. So if you ignore the data and make gut-only decisions, you risk being misled by a few loud voices of your own biases. In any business, not just cleaning, it's easy to give too much weight to the most recent customer story you heard, or a single dramatic incident. That is called recency bias or anecdotal bias. And I mean, how many of us are guilty of that? Think about it, really. When that one story sticks in your mind so much that it outweighs a stack of contrary evidence. For example, maybe one big client or one high value client or someone that you've had for a while complains particularly loudly about like a cleaning. It could be like a product that was left on a surface and it like left a little bit of residue, or maybe there was a scent that they didn't like. And you know how customers are, they get a little bit too emotional over nothing sometimes. And so you might feel pressure to change something like a product, or you might want to reprimand an employee, or you might start really stressing about, oh, do I have to rethink my entire process now? Do I need to retrain people? But if 99% of your other clients haven't complained ever, and maybe they even like the scent of this product or whatever the other customer is complaining about, then a gut-driven overreaction could actually waste money and upset the silent majority, which is actually who you want to take care of. You want to take care of the silent majority. The real-world cautionary tale of this is a famous example outside the cleaning field is IBM's decision decades ago to sell a division against the recommendations of their data analysts. Okay, so at IBM, executives went with their gut, and it cost their company over $1 billion in losses. So the lesson there, without getting too deep into it, was that even experienced leaders make costly mistakes when they dismiss data. And while your cleaning business decisions might not be billion-dollar moves, the principle scales down. So ignoring your metrics, whether it's profitability per job, customer retention rate, satisfaction, blah, 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 that can hurt your bottom line and growth. And on the flip side, if you ignore the anecdotes and make data-only decisions, you risk missing the context and the why behind the numbers, which is so important. You can't have one without the other. And you can also miss potentially emerging trends or patterns that are starting to form because they haven't produced obvious data yet. Like data can sometimes give you a false sense of security. Like, oh, the numbers look good, so everything must be fine. If you listen to my podcast about good to great, good is the enemy of great. So we never want things to be good. We want to always strive for great. But anyway, the numbers can mask the brewing issues or opportunities that only surface through human feedback. And in a business like cleaning, which as we said is people-centric, people are the cornerstone of our business, the anecdotal insights are so important. The human element is the most important aspect of our business. Even if you don't have staff, all of your customers are people that you deal with, if not face-to-face, you talk to them every day via email and text and phone. So you have to be talking to them, you have to be surveying them, and you have to be checking in to see how they're tracking and what their feedback's like. Like, for example, like your client satisfaction rating, if that's something you track, and if you don't track it at the moment, easy way to track it is just tally up the amount of positive feedback pieces of snippets that you get versus complaints that you get. And if you survey your clients every month and just ask like, how are you doing? A good response, that can be like a positive affirmation. It can be a positive piece of feedback, and you weigh those up against your negative ones. And so you can start tracking this. And let's just say that your client satisfaction average might be 4.5 out of 5 this quarter, which looks great. But that could hide the fact that a few key clients have quietly drifted downward in their satisfaction. Like maybe other ones have risen to the top, and maybe some of your bigger, like long-standing important clients have actually gone to the bottom, but you don't see that. You just see the number. And so if you're only watching the dashboard or the metric or the spreadsheet, you might not notice those until the clients cancel their contracts, or they call you up and they're like, hey, don't come to my house anymore. And you're like, huh? What happened? But if you or your managers regularly chat with the clients, you might pick up on subtle dissatisfaction or changing needs. Like an offhand comment, it could be like, I wish you also offered window cleaning. We're thinking about finding a company that does both. You know, that one comment or anecdote could alert you to service expansion that needs to be happening, or an add-on of like an upsell or a widget. People who are super data driven are probably going to disagree with a lot of this, even if like the facts kind of speak for themselves and it's all making sense. A lot of data analysts and people that are really numbers driven might disagree with this. Like I consider myself a numbers person, but I also understand the importance of this side as well. And like even Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he famously said that when the anecdotes and the data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. There's something wrong with the way you're measuring it. In other words, if your gut or a trusted employee is telling you something that the data isn't showing yet, don't dismiss it. You need to investigate it further, because it might highlight a flaw in your metrics or an area in your measuring system or your spreadsheets that it just like fell off the radar and it's gone completely under the rug, and you just kind of haven't caught onto it yet. And so that's why the magic really happens when you combine anecdotal insights with the analytical evidence. They're not enemies on a battlefield, right? They're teammates. They're each covering the other's blind spots. And here's how they complement each other in more of a cleaning business context again. So anecdotes, they can move into hypothesis, and the data can be the validation for those hypotheses. So treat anecdotes as pointers or hypotheses that guide where to look in your data. For example, if multiple team members mention that jobs in the north side of the city take longer due to traffic, that is a hypothesis or an anecdotal piece of data or just a bit of feedback. And you can check your GPS or your timesheet data to see if travel time to the north side of the city is actually averaging more. And if data confirms it, you might adjust the scheduling or charge a travel fee for the clients, or maybe you just put them later in the day to combat the traffic problem. And if the data doesn't confirm it, maybe the issue is only at a certain time, or it might just be a perception because of the routes that they're driving. And maybe there's like if you're driving on a highway, a 10-minute drive on a highway might feel twice as long as just driving 10 minutes on back roads, you know? And so either way, you have to dig deeper. And the anecdotal stories will essentially tell you what questions to ask. The data is just going to help you answer them. The data can lead into big questions, and the anecdotes can lead into explanations as well on the flip side. So conversely, you can use the data to flag what needs explaining and then gather the necessary anecdotes to find the explanation. Like, for example, your analytics might show that one of your cleaning like one of your team members or your employees has a 25% higher client dip rate, like people asking either to not have that person again or just canceling their cleans, or maybe it's like they're 20% slower at these jobs on average than your other employees. And so that's when you need to start asking some questions if you're not sure why. So the data says, look, something is going on here. But by talking to the clients or the employee or other team members, which is the anecdotal research, you're going to discover that maybe, I don't know what the reason could be. It could be like they're leaving like a small like bouquet of fresh flowers at the kitchen bench for that client every month. Maybe there's like a personal relationship between them. Maybe they're good friends and they go above and beyond, and maybe they do like window tracks and they clean the kitchen windows when they're not supposed to. And so they do these other things which are great and the customer loves it, but it takes more time. And so that's reflecting in the spreadsheets. But if you don't ask that question, then you're not going to know the root of it. And then you can make decisions based on that. And you can be like, oh, well, it's great what you're doing here, but time is money and blah, blah, blah. This is costing us money. Just like things like that. So it raises the question for you to ask. And then the anecdotes can give you the explanation if you talk to the customer or your employee or whoever it may be. And so now you have an explanation for the numbers and an idea that's worth spreading to other employees potentially if you actually find that something is good. Like we had this recently where what were they doing? One of our customers was leaving this I can't remember what it was. It was like this chocolate which is like dairy free, gluten free, and they had so many of them that they got from somewhere else, and they were leaving it for these customers, and customers kept asking for this particular person back time and time again. And we just thought they were amazing cleaners, but we found out like they were just leaving like nice treats for our customers. So it gave us the idea that like maybe we could just start doing that for everyone, and everyone can get chocolate and everyone will love us all so equally. And yeah, it's like an idea. It could sprout an idea that's worth kind of exploring as well. But in this way, the data points out where to investigate, and the anecdotal inquiry will reveal the story behind the numbers. So the anecdote will give you the explanation that is derived from the big question from that data set. Okay. And it also gives you balanced decision making. So this is how they can complement each other. By weighing both sides, you reduce risk. Like if both your gut and the stats tell you the same thing, you can move forward confidently. If they disagree, that's a signal to just pause for a second and dig a little bit deeper. You might have to ask questions. You might have to dig a bit deeper into the stats. For instance, if your sales data for your add-on services like oven cleaning, window cleaning, let's just say it's lower than average. The revenue for those upsell services is lower than average. But when you go talk to your clients, when you look for the anecdotal evidence, you actually find that there's a high interest in these upsell services, but the disconnect could mean that you aren't effectively marketing it, or they just don't know about it. And so from recognizing that, you could test a new approach. You could maybe start sending reminder emails about upsell services. You could leave like a note on customers' benches about window cleaning and oven cleaning. And so you can start to increase your profitability by adding on these services that give you a higher cost per clean and a higher margin. And you also increase the revenue for such add-on services, and that will reflect in the numbers. But that came from anecdotal evidence, just asking the question from seeing the data and then looking at the anecdote for the explanation. If that makes sense. I hope I'm keeping you here. It's this is pretty high level stuff. So if you've made it this far and you're still interested to kind of dig deeper, then I take my hat off to you. Well done. It's also going to give you examples of missed opportunities and pitfalls. So again, this is how they kind of complement each other, anecdotal and analytical. It can give you examples of missed opportunities and pitfalls. So like to really cement why balancing these two types of evidence is crucial, let's kind of spotlight a few more quick examples that are specific to a cleaning business, right? So missed opportunity by ignoring data. First of all, let's dig into this. So imagine you have a handful of vocal clients who constantly praise your window cleaning or your bathroom cleaning, and they tell you it's the best in town. So anecdotally, you feel the service is a hit, but the actual numbers might show that only 10% of your clients like purchase window cleaning as an upsell, or that only 10% of them actually leave reviews about the bathroom cleaning that you do. And so if you focus only on the praise, the anecdotes, then you might invest heavily in more of the window cleaning side. You might even put on a new window cleaner because you think, oh, this is great. People love it. We're going to do more and more of this. And only to find that most of your client base wasn't actually interested in the first place. And so the few anecdotes were positive, but they're not representative of the quiet or the silent majority. So checking the data first would have revealed that the uptake in this add-on service is actually small and not representative of everyone else. So a wiser move might be to survey clients on why they aren't choosing add-ons like window cleaning, or just to market it differently, to push it out better, to change the messaging or to boost it more so that more people see it, rather than assuming it's just like universally loved, or on the contrary, like universally hated if you think that people aren't buying it just because they don't like it. Maybe they just don't know. Now, on the other hand, like let's say you get some feedback from your staff this time, and now they're saying that this particular office client or this particular residential client has increasingly unreasonable demands. Like they keep adding tasks that aren't in the scope and they seem unhappy no matter what, aka Karens, people that we do not like and we definitely don't want to do business with. And if you ignore this kind of on the ground feedback because the client hasn't formally complained and their payments are always on time, and like, so the data is fine, the data looks fine, you might be blindsided when the client suddenly cancels. But the warning signs were always there in the form of those anecdotes. So a proactive check-in or like renegotiating scope based on employees' feedback and based on what it seems like the customer actually wants and their interests, that could save the customer. That could save the contract. It could save the client. And this is a case where purely looking at retention data or revenue would not flag a problem, or even looking at that client's satisfaction history, their feedback history, that wouldn't flag that problem. But listening to your employees' stories would. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the good and the bad of it and how they work and what the differences are and what they really mean. But like, how do we implement a balanced approach in just day-to-day operations? All right, let's talk about how you can practically balance anecdotal and analytical evidence as a routine part of running your cleaning business. All right, number one, set up regular info channels. Make it a habit to gather both anecdotal and analytical evidence. So for anecdotes, this could mean scheduling brief, like regular meetings with your cleaning employees, or like in the form of toolbox meetings. So we do those every week and every month, or just like a weekly team huddle, where they can kind of share observations from job sites. They can encourage, or you can encourage like an open door policy for employees to report any on-site comments from clients, or if it's like if they're at a house cleaning it and they hear a comment from a client about something they're not happy with, which is something that you've never heard of before, they can say that in the meeting. And on the analytics side, you can just ensure that you're tracking like the basics consistently, having the spreadsheets, having the gross profit things, having like a CRM software that you can use to log things properly, and timesheet tracking, just making sure you're on top of the numbers and you're understanding the numbers as well. I've got like 15 spreadsheets that I look at weekly, right? It's like I'm so hell-bent on looking at these numbers and understanding them and being so in touch with them. But I never want to let go of the anecdotal side, especially not in a cleaning business, right? And so you can use simple spreadsheets for stuff like that. You can just start looking at monthly revenue per client. And then a little bit deeper than that, you can look at the monthly or the weekly revenue per employee, per client. Yeah, you can just keep going down this rabbit hole, spreadsheet after spreadsheet. The more, the merrier. There's nothing wrong with tracking more numbers in the business. The goal is to have both a narrative of how things are going and also a set of numbers that you can predictably track and measure. And so number two, you can use data to temper your gut and vice versa. So when you get a gut feeling or a striking anecdote, like just pause for a second and check the data if it's available. And when you see a surprising data point, ask what stories might be behind it. For example, if an employee says, clients are really loving the new website or the new online booking system, that's awesome to hear, but now let's check the metrics. And in the next few months, let's see if the bookings did increase, or if the customer satisfaction rates moved up, or if bookings decreased, or if website visits decreased, or if click-through rate decreased or increased. So that's starting with anecdotal and then moving into analytical. Now, conversely, if your data shows a dip in productivity on Fridays, maybe you can bring it up in those team meetings and be like, hey team, hey guys, I noticed that Fridays are slower. Does anyone have any thoughts on why? And then you might learn that by Friday, the team is just low on supplies or energy or morale, which is an anecdotal insight. And you can dig deeper into that and ask more questions. And then you can address that by adjusting, whatever the thing is. And then that will reflect in the analytics later on when you see the productivity and the satisfaction rate for clients on Fridays has increased. Number 3, you can train your team in this mindset. This is super important as well. So it's not only important for us to have this mindset and have that downstream effect for our managers and our cleaners and all that stuff, but share this with your people on the ground. Share this with your cleaners. Share this with your VA, your manager. Share the importance of reporting both the facts and the feelings. If everyone knows that you value data and stories, they'll be more likely to contribute to both of them. Like, for instance, you can train your supervisors or your trainers to always accompany like a monthly spreadsheet with a short narrative. Like you see the numbers, but you're not the one on the ground doing it. So get the supervisor or the trainers or the manager to just like put a little note beside the spreadsheet and be like, what's actually behind these numbers? Are there any stories that I can attach to these? Are there any insights I can give here? Any ideas or any feedback to explain the highs or the lows? This sets like a new company culture that neither anecdotes nor data live simply in a vacuum, in isolation of one another or anything else. Number 4, you can avoid confirmation bias. Like, be cautious to not only listen to anecdotes that confirm what you already believe, or to only look at data that supports your opinion. Like, for example, if you feel that weekend jobs just aren't worth it, or sorry, I just dropped something. If they're not worth it or they're not profitable, you might unconsciously pay attention only to stories of like tough weekend jobs, and you might just start saying no to everything on a weekend, or maybe on the flip side, you want more weekend jobs because you think they're higher value, but you're actually not making money on them. And so you might be cherry picking data that shows something that is in favor of your bias, right? But instead, you can seek out the full picture. So you can ask for a broader feedback scope and pull all the numbers that are associated with it. So like a balanced approach, it requires intellectual honesty. Sometimes the data will prove that your hunch is wrong, and sometimes the anecdotes will reveal an exception to what the numbers say. Embrace that, because it leads to better decisions. Number 5, how we can implement a balanced approach of the anecdotal and analytical data in day-to-day operations is make balanced decisions a routine. So for every significant decision, like expanding a service, changing a process, investing in certain equipment, make it standard practice to ask 2 questions. Number 1, what data do we have about this? And number 2, what are people saying about this? If you have answers to both, you're in a good position. If you find you have tons of data but no real world stories, or vice versa, consider delaying that decision until you gather the missing perspective. Even like a quick extra phone call to a client, or to go and look at a monthly report from something, that can save you from just going in blind. And like, I've done this with my expansion potential or opportunities into other states. I've had lots of data on one side, but then I was lacking like the anecdotal data of, the anecdotal data of people on the ground, and just looking at the market and getting a feel and a vibe for the area. So then I had to balance my decision-making process. I had to be like, okay, I've got the analytics, but I need to look at the anecdotal evidence as well before I can move forward with this, because I don't want to be going in blind. I don't want to be going in naive and not considering what else could be at stake here. And so, yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. I hope I was able to retain your attention for this long. This is, like I said, it's a bit more of a high level kind of episode. I know there's a lot of people in here that maybe they're just starting out or haven't even started out, and this might be the first episode you're listening to, and you're like overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, what is he talking about? Like I always say, even if you're not at the point in the journey yet where this is important, it's still good to listen to, because it gets the wheels in your head turning, and you may be able to put this in the back pocket and save it for a rainy day. Okay? It's just good to exercise your brain on these types of things as well. It never hurts to learn more about the thing that you want to learn more about, right? And so to wrap everything up and put a nice little bow on it, here's 6 strong takeaways from the episode that you can apply in your cleaning business right away. Number 1, quite simply, listen to the stories. Make it a point regularly to talk with your customers and your staff. Their anecdotal feedback, whether it's praise, a complaint, or just a casual observation or a fleeting comment, is valuable insight. For example, like someone's note about a client's security procedure or a client's comment about a missed bin that wasn't emptied can be golden nuggets of information. Don't just hear them, record them, reflect on them, and share them with your team if necessary. Number 2, measure what matters. Identify a handful of key metrics for your operations and track them consistently. This might average, or it might include the average cleaning time per job. It could be customer satisfaction ratings, which is super important if you're trying to grow your business. And that can just be done in the form of post-service surveys or monthly surveys that you send to everyone. And it could be could be employee attendance, it could be client retention rates, staff turnover, whatever it may be. Data is your friend. It provides an objective check on how you're doing, and it helps you spot trends. And remember, relying on data can improve productivity and even profitability. So it's worth the effort for that alone. Number 3, cross-verify your gut feelings. Super important. When you get an intuitive feeling or hear an anecdote that suggests making a change, cross-verify that with data if available. If a client says your team seemed a bit rushed last time, or Isabella was a bit flustered last time and she was just trying to fly through everything. Check that if the day's schedule was overbooked, or if you accidentally book someone in for a time slot when they're not usually working and they had something on later that day that they didn't know about and they just didn't bring it up. Maybe your gut, it might say a particular thing wasn't profitable, and so maybe that's why people are rushing, or maybe there is a proper anecdotal reason for it. Or analytical reason for it. So you can pull the financials out and verify the margins. You might confirm that, in fact, the schedule was good for that day, and maybe there was a problem with the profitability or the time that's allocated to that job. And so you just cross-verify the gut feeling with the analytical data and vice versa. Okay. Number 4, use anecdotes to humanize the data. Also very important. The numbers on a report can be super abstract, and so you need to attach real examples to them. If your data shows a 5% rise in complaints, dig in and read the complaint notes, or call up those clients and hear the story. Knowing what the complaints were about and knowing why the complaints went up by 5 to 10% is really, really useful. And knowing why, 3 complaints were about a new employee who needed more training, or they were about people not using the right color-coded cloths, or people just are missing inside the bin cupboards and not cleaning them. These will give you an actionable fix. So knowing the anecdote behind the data, humanizing the data and getting the story attached to it, this will ensure that you don't overreact to numbers without context. It gives you the actionable fix. And don't just take that from me. Listen to the experts. They say that qualitative info like interviews and surveys or anecdotes alongside the quantitative stats like the spreadsheets and the numbers and the KPIs and the dashboards lead to smarter decisions when paired together. So don't take it from me. Take it from the experts. All right, number 5 for the 6 key takeaways. Okay. Don't dismiss one or the other. Make data versus gut a false choice. Make it a fallacy. Commit to using both. If anyone on your team says, I feel this is happening, but I have nothing to back it up, encourage them to gather some evidence about it. And similarly, if someone says the analytics or the data or the metrics is saying this, but the customers are saying that, then treat both inputs seriously. An anecdote that contradicts data might signal a gap in the measuring in the measuring process, or in the mechanism of which you measure it by. It may be that you're not tracking a certain customer data point. And as Jeff Bezos pointed out, data that contradicts your anecdotal impression might reveal a blind spot or a bias in your perspective. So strive for a mindset where neither customer stories nor performance metrics are ignored. Number 6 for the 6 takeaways for us as cleaning business owners on anecdotal versus analytical evidence is build a system for both feedback loops. This is probably the most important because we actually want to be tracking this stuff. So lastly, just create a simple system to capture and review both kinds of evidence. This could mean having a monthly dashboard review. If you don't have a dashboard yet, create a dashboard. I have a contracted CFO that builds all of my dashboards for me and builds a lot of this data for me so I can look at it at a glance. And you can just have a dashboard review meeting where you go over key numbers and also a field feedback roundtable, if you will, where everyone shares like notable stories or insights and just little feedback nuggets from the month. And you can use a tool even. Like, for instance, you can keep a shared document or an app where employees can just note client feedback in real time, or they can even put it on the job notes, and your VA or you can check that every day or every week. And you can pair that with your analytics reports. And so by systemizing this, by creating the infrastructure for it and creating the frameworks for both feedback loops, you won't accidentally become lopsided or imbalanced. It keeps you grounded in reality and connected to your business at both the macro and the micro level. So by applying those tips, you're going to make more balanced and more informed decisions for your cleaning business, and you'll catch problems before they escalate. And you can invest in ideas that have both the buzz and the backing by the anecdotal and the analytical evidence. And you can ultimately deliver better service by understanding what's really happening from all angles. Like, remember, the data tells you what is happening, and the anecdotes often tell you why. You need both to get the full picture. So equip yourself with this mindset and this ideology, and you'll be well on your way to smarter growth and happier customers and happier staff, and therefore a happier you, which is great. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of Self Made. If this was your first time here, I apologize if this sounded really, really confusing at times. I'm trying to get more into these kind of higher level podcasts because it's a really good mental exercise for me to kind of get all of this out of my head and just structure it into a podcast and then deliver it. Because like I always say to people, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. So me going back and going deeper in on these concepts and these ideas and these principles is not only good for me to share with people, but it's also good for myself to just build the mental pathways and the bridges inside my brain and just like strengthen that mind muscle, you know? So I hope you found a lot of value in that. And with that being said, I will talk to you next time. So see you then.